In a town where the waves whisper the secrets of the shore and the sun sets over peaceful streets, there was one secret that would shatter everything. It all started with a love affair, an illicit connection between two people who, in the eyes of the town, had everything to lose. What began as stolen moments of passion and desire quickly escalated into something far more dangerous. In a community where everyone knew everyone, secrets rarely stayed hidden for long. But this one would cost a life. It was a small town, nestled by the ocean, where neighbors greeted each other by name and where the rhythm of daily life seemed predictable. But sometimes, even in places that feel safe and familiar, the darkest secrets lurk just beneath the surface. And in this town, the ripple effects of one affair were about to change everything. No one could have predicted that a seemingly ordinary evening would soon reveal that betrayal could strike in the most unexpected of places. Someone had been murdered, someone who, only hours before, was just another face in the crowd. Someone who was thought to be safe, loved, and known by all. But as the police began their investigation, they quickly realized this wasn't a simple case of wrong place, wrong time. The affair, so innocuous at first, had created a ripple that would soon become a devastating wave. There were whispers of jealousy, of revenge, and of something far more dangerous than anyone had ever anticipated. The twist? The murderer wasn't a stranger, a shadowy figure who had come to town with ill intentions. No, the murderer was someone no one had ever suspected, someone who lived among them, someone who was considered family. It's a story that asks the question, how well do we really know the people closest to us? When betrayal strikes, it doesn't just destroy a life, it shatters everything in its wake. But the worst part? The truth was buried beneath layers of lies, and the clues were scattered all around them. Only one thing was certain. This quiet seaside town, known for its peaceful charm, would never be the same again. The town of Newport was everything you could imagine in a small coastal community, a place where the salt air mingled with the scent of fresh fish and the scent of the ocean. If you blinked, you might miss it, snuggled in between cliffs and a serene bay, with narrow streets lined with old houses that had been passed down for generations. Life here moved at a slower pace, until it didn't. It seemed like any other in Newport, a time when everyone knew everyone else's business, and the townspeople were connected not just by geography, but by shared histories. The familiar faces of neighbors and the warm greetings on every corner made this town feel like a refuge from the rest of the world. But even in a town like Newport, life was far from perfect. Beneath the charming exterior, there were tensions, secrets, and people trying to escape their pasts. Maggie Thompson was the heart of Newport. At 33, she was a local teacher, someone everyone knew. She was known for her kindness, always there for her students, her family, and the community. But Maggie, despite her bright exterior, had secrets of her own, the kind of secrets no one saw coming. Maggie Thompson was not the type to seek the spotlight, but she was impossible to ignore. She was the kind of person who made an impression without trying. Her warm smile, her laugh that seemed to light up even the dullest rooms, and her genuine interest in the people around her. She taught at the local high school, where she had worked for the past 5 years, teaching English to a group of wide-eyed students who adored her. But Maggie's life wasn't as perfect as it seemed. Beneath the picture-perfect exterior, Maggie was struggling with a sense of loneliness that no one could have guessed. Married to a well-respected local businessman, Chris Thompson, Maggie had built a life that appeared to be the ideal American dream. Yet, behind closed doors, the cracks in her marriage were starting to show. Chris, a successful entrepreneur in the town, spent more time on his business than he did with his wife, leaving Maggie to feel isolated and emotionally abandoned. This sense of loneliness led Maggie to an unexpected place, into the arms of someone who seemed to offer her everything her husband couldn't. It was a secret that, would soon turn their lives upside down. It began innocently enough. A fleeting glance at a local cafe turned into a conversation, and soon, Maggie found herself drawn to another man. The kind of man who paid attention, who listened. His name was Adam Walker. Adam Walker, a charming 35-year-old mechanic, had moved to Newport just a few months earlier. With his rugged looks and magnetic personality, he quickly became a fixture in the local community. He was the kind of man who carried a mystery with him, a mystery that intrigued Maggie. Adam was an outsider, with no prior connection to the town, but he quickly won over the residents with his hardworking nature and friendly demeanor. Maggie and Adam's paths crossed one afternoon when Maggie's car broke down on the outskirts of town. It was supposed to be a quick fix, but it ended up being more than that. Their conversations grew longer, more intimate, and before long, Maggie found herself confiding in Adam in a way she hadn't in years. She spoke of her marriage, her feelings of abandonment, and the loneliness she couldn't shake. Adam, with his quiet understanding, listened, and in those conversations, Maggie found the solace she had longed for. The affair started with small, stolen moments, casual coffee dates, long conversations, and simple touches. For Maggie, it was a temporary escape from the suffocating loneliness of her marriage. For Adam, it became something more, a connection that, over time, would evolve into a powerful, consuming attraction. As the weeks passed, their bond deepened, and Maggie found herself torn between her duty to her husband and the undeniable pull she felt toward Adam. But like all secrets, this one didn't stay hidden forever. Then there was Chris, Maggie's husband. To outsiders, he was the picture of success, with a charming smile and a booming business. But behind closed doors, he was different. And when Chris found out about Maggie's affair, he was no longer the man everyone thought they knew. Chris Thompson was a well-liked figure in Newport, a local businessman who ran a successful hardware store that had been in his family for generations. His polished demeanor and reputation as a hard worker made him well-respected in town. But Maggie knew the truth. Chris was emotionally distant, often consumed by work and his own interests. Their marriage had become a ritual of obligation rather than passion, and Maggie felt increasingly invisible. When Chris discovered that Maggie had been unfaithful, he was devastated, but his reaction was not what anyone would have expected. Rather than confronting her with anger or rage, Chris withdrew, becoming more secretive and cold. He didn't show his hurt the way one might expect. Instead, he became fixated on something else, revenge. It was a slow burn, an escalating tension that simmered beneath the surface. But the affair wasn't just a betrayal of Chris. It was a betrayal that would reverberate through the entire town. Everyone had a stake in the outcome, and when the truth finally came to light, it would rip Newport apart. The town of Newport was full of characters whose lives would become intertwined with this tragic story. There was Sarah, Maggie's best friend, who knew about the affair but chose to stay silent, conflicted between loyalty to her friend and the guilt of withholding the truth. There was also Detective Robert Grant, the seasoned investigator who was tasked with piecing together the truth. He would soon uncover shocking details that no one expected, including evidence of just how deeply the affair had affected everyone involved. And then there was Adam himself. Charming, mysterious, and willing to risk it all for the woman he loved. But was he capable of murder? Or was there someone else who had the most to gain from Maggie's death? As the investigation unfolded, the pieces began to fall into place, but no one was prepared for what they would uncover. The twists kept coming, each more shocking than the last. And at the center of it all was a question that no one could answer. Who would kill someone they loved? As the affair tore apart Maggie's life, it led to a confrontation no one could have predicted. The pressure from both sides, Chris's quiet anger, Adam's unrelenting love, built to an explosive breaking point. It was only a matter of time before someone snapped. The town of Newport, once so peaceful, would soon become a battleground for truth and lies. The ultimate question became, who had the most to gain from Maggie's death? And who was capable of carrying out the unthinkable act? The tension had been building for weeks in the small town of Newport, but to outsiders, nothing seemed amiss. The residents still greeted each other with warm smiles. The sun still set behind the hills, and life moved at its usual pace. But underneath the surface, a storm was brewing. Maggie had spent months in a quiet turmoil, her emotions torn between two men, her distant husband, Chris, and Adam, the man who had shown her the love and attention she so desperately craved. What started as an innocent connection with Adam had turned into a consuming affair, one that she knew could destroy everything if it came to light. As the weeks passed, Maggie found herself unable to keep the weight of her secrets from her husband. The lies were taking their toll on her emotions, on her marriage, on her entire sense of self. Adam, too, was becoming more and more attached. His feelings for Maggie grew stronger with every passing day, and the affair escaped to something far deeper, an obsession, a desperate need to be with her at all costs. But Adam wasn't the only one consumed by emotions. Chris, though he had been distant for so long, began to sense that something was amiss. He had always been observant, and now he was paying closer attention to the subtle signs, the late nights, the unexplained absences, the occasional coldness between him and Maggie. He wasn't blind to the fact that something was happening behind his back. He just hadn't known what. And so, the situation reached a breaking point. The unspoken tension in the house grew unbearable. Maggie had tried to distance herself from Adam, hoping that the affair would end before it went too far. But Adam wasn't one to let go. He needed her, and he couldn't stand the idea of losing her to someone else. His jealousy had started to fester, and with it came a dangerous possessiveness that it was a cool autumn evening when everything came to a head. The sun had already set, casting the town in a dim, eerie glow. Chris had planned a quiet dinner for him and Maggie, hoping for a chance to reconnect. But Maggie, consumed by guilt and a need for closure, had already made up her mind. She had planned to end things with Adam that evening. She couldn't keep living the lie. Not anymore. Maggie's heart was heavy as she walked into the kitchen, where Chris was preparing a simple meal. She knew what she had to do, but the words felt like lead in her mouth. Meanwhile, Adam, desperate and not knowing that Maggie had already decided to end their relationship, was waiting outside her home. He had called her earlier in the day, and she had promised him she would meet him after dinner. Unwitting to Maggie, Adam was already spiraling. His thoughts were clouded with jealousy and desperation. When he saw the lights of her house dimming from the street, he couldn't stand it any longer. He made his decision. The confrontation that night was inevitable. Maggie had never planned for it to end like this, but Adam, in his growing madness, would not take no for an answer. The sound of the doorbell echoed through the quiet house, a simple noise that would soon mark the beginning of the end. Maggie's heart raced as she opened the door, expecting Adam but bracing for the confrontation. What she didn't expect was the coldness in his eyes, the look of a man who had finally snapped. Adam didn't say much at first. He just stood there, his face tight with anger and hurt. Maggie tried to push past him, her mind focused on Chris and the dinner that was still waiting on the table. She had to end this now. But Adam's grip on her arm tightened as he stepped forward, blocking the door. In a panic, Maggie tried to pull away, but his words came out in a low, almost hissed whisper. "You're not leaving me, Maggie. Not like this." In the struggle that ensued, Maggie's eyes widened with shock and fear as Adam's emotions shifted from anger to something darker. His grip on her tightened, and before she could fully comprehend what was happening, Adam pushed her back against the hallway wall, knocking the wind out of her. The brief, shocking violence took her breath away. This wasn't the man she had known. In the chaos of the struggle, Maggie was knocked to the floor. Adam loomed over her, his hands shaking as he reached into his jacket pocket. He had brought a knife with him, one that he had kept hidden in the folds of his jacket. It wasn't meant to be used, but in the heat of the moment, it became the only thing that would give him control. Adam stood there, knife in hand, as Maggie's last breath left her body. She didn't scream, but her eyes, wide with shock and disbelief, spoke 1,000 words. Adam hadn't just killed her. He had killed the person she had once been. The person who believed that she could have a future beyond the broken fragments of her marriage and affair. When the police arrived at the scene, they were met with a hauntingly quiet house. The front door stood ajar, as though someone had left in a hurry. The faint smell of freshly cut flowers lingered in the air, but there was an undeniable tension. The crime scene was clean, too clean. Nothing had been stolen. No forced entry. Yet, the body of Maggie Thompson lay motionless on the floor, a pool of blood beginning to congeal at her side. It was clear, this wasn't a robbery gone wrong. It wasn't random violence. This was personal. Detective Robert Grant, a seasoned investigator in Newport, stepped into the house, his eyes immediately scanning the room. The scene before him seemed almost staged, everything in its place, except for one vital thing: Maggie's lifeless body. He took in the details, methodical in his approach, his mind racing through the possibilities. Who would want to kill a woman like Maggie? The town adored her, after all. She was a teacher, a friend, a neighbor. No one could have predicted that she would end up as a victim of something so brutal. Grant's initial thought? This was a crime of passion. He didn't believe for a second that it was a random act. But who could be responsible? The clues were few. But the emotional weight of the scene suggested something deeper: betrayal, anger, and a love triangle that had gone terribly wrong. In a town as small as Newport, the list of suspects didn't take long to form. But the twists in this case would make even the most seasoned detectives second-guess everything they knew. The first suspect was obvious: Adam Walker, Maggie's affair partner. He had been seen near her house the night of the murder, and his connection to Maggie had been no secret. But Adam was quick to provide an alibi. He claimed to have been at the local bar with a friend, Greg Johnson, at the time of Maggie's death. No one had seen him leave the bar, and his alibi seemed airtight. But was it? Next on the list was Chris Thompson, Maggie's husband. While Chris had no known violent tendencies, he had been the last person to see Maggie alive. Had their troubled marriage led him to violence? Had the betrayal pushed him over the edge? Chris's cold, distant behavior after Maggie's death only deepened the suspicion. But he claimed to have been in his office working late, a statement he was quick to repeat when the police questioned him. Could it be possible that the broken marriage was more than just emotional tension? Finally, there was Sarah Martin, Maggie's best friend. Sarah had always been a pillar of support for Maggie, but was she hiding something? Her presence in the investigation seemed too calm, almost detached. She had been the one Maggie confided in about the affair, but had Sarah's loyalty to Maggie blinded her to the truth? Or did Sarah know more than she was letting on? As the detectives sifted through the house, they began to gather pieces of a puzzle that didn't quite fit. The first clue was a broken vase by the front door, its shards scattered across the floor. A simple accident, or a sign of a violent struggle? Next, there was Maggie's phone, lying on the counter, its screen cracked. The last message sent read, "I'm ending it tonight. I can't keep living this lie." The words seemed like a cry for help, a final declaration before her tragic end. But who had sent it? Adam? Chris? Or someone else? Key pieces of evidence were beginning to form a picture, but they didn't add up in a way that made sense. The phone records showed calls between Maggie and Adam in the hours leading up to the murder. But there was also a phone call between Maggie and Sarah that night, one that seemed to be unrecorded. Why had Sarah's call not been logged? Had it been deleted on purpose? In Maggie's bedroom, there was a diary, pages filled with entries about the affair, her love for Adam, and her growing fear of Chris's reaction. But there was also an entry written just hours before her death. Tonight, I make the decision to leave it all behind. Adam will understand. I just have to tell him face to face, and then I can finally be free. Was she planning to break up with Adam? Or was there something more behind her decision to meet with him that night? But as the investigation continued, new information surfaced. Information that cast doubt on everything the police thought they knew about the case. When the police finally tracked down Adam's alibi, they found something that didn't quite match up. Surveillance footage from the bar had no clear shot of Adam entering at the time he claimed. Was his alibi fabricated? Had he lied to the police? But when Adam was brought in for questioning, his demeanor was calm, too calm. His story didn't waver, and despite his lack of proof, there was something about him that felt off. Could it be that Adam was hiding something darker than the police had anticipated? Meanwhile, Chris's office was thoroughly searched. The police found a drawer full of photos of Maggie, but also one of Adam. There were photos from the time before the affair started, but some seemed oddly recent. Had Chris known about the affair all along? Was it possible that Chris had confronted Adam before Maggie's death? But when Chris was questioned, his response was simple. I've never seen those photos before. And then came the shocking discovery. A knife tucked away in the back of Chris's office desk. It wasn't the weapon used in the crime, but the presence of it raised a chilling possibility. Had Chris been planning something more than just an emotional confrontation? Could he have been preparing for violence in a way no one had expected? The interrogations became increasingly tense as each suspect was pulled in one by one. Adam's story about the bar grew more inconsistent as the hours went on, but there was still no concrete evidence to prove his involvement. His anger seemed to bubble to the surface, especially when he was shown the photos of Maggie with Chris. He swore he had nothing to do with the murder, but couldn't seem to explain why his alibi didn't match up. Chris, on the other hand, was cold and distant throughout his interview. He stuck to his story, denying any involvement. But when Detective Grant pushed him about the knife in his office, Chris's calm demeanor faltered just slightly, a slip-up that hinted at the tension running beneath the surface. And then there was Sarah. She seemed almost too eager to help, providing an abundance of information. But when questioned about the deleted call on Maggie's phone, Sarah's composure slipped for the first time. She stammered, fumbled over her words, and avoided eye contact. Could it be that Sarah knew more than she let on? Had she been hiding a secret of her own? Could the truth really be this twisted? Or was someone else behind this crime? The police had a suspect, but every lead seemed to raise more questions than answers. As the investigation deepened, it became clear that nothing in this case was as it seemed, and the truth might just be more complicated than anyone could have imagined. The courtroom was packed with people from Newport. The town had been following the case from the very beginning. Every resident had their own theory, their own version of what happened the night Maggie Thompson was murdered. But now, it was time for the truth to come out, and the air in the courtroom was thick with tension. The people of Newport wanted answers, and those answers were about to be delivered in the most public way possible. The case had captivated everyone, from the locals who had known Maggie their entire lives to the outsider, the killer who had infiltrated their quiet town. The trial was set to begin. The prosecution's case was clear and focused. They believed that Adam Walker, the affair partner, was the one who had killed Maggie in a fit of rage when she tried to end the affair. The prosecution argued that Adam's increasing jealousy and possessiveness were the driving factors behind Maggie's tragic end. His alibi, they pointed out, was flimsy at best, and the evidence of his obsession with Maggie was irrefutable, but the defense wasn't backing down. They claimed that Adam had nothing to do with the murder. They argued that he had been at the bar all night, and that the idea of him being involved in Maggie's death was preposterous. In fact, the defense pushed the theory that Chris Thompson, Maggie's husband, had killed her in a moment of blind rage after discovering the affair. The courtroom was tense as both sides presented their arguments. The defense painted Chris as a man driven to madness by the betrayal of his wife, while the prosecution painted Adam as the scorned lover who had become violent when faced with rejection. The key issue was the knife found in Chris's office. Why had it been there? Was it merely a tool of protection, or had Chris planned something far more sinister? But the game-changing evidence came when Sarah Martin, Maggie's best friend, took the stand. The entire courtroom held its breath. Her testimony, once seen as mere background, now held the weight of the case. Sarah was calm at first, but the moment the prosecution revealed her deleted phone calls to Maggie the night of the murder, everything changed. Could Sarah have been hiding more than just the affair? Was her obsession with Maggie the true cause of this tragedy? The shocking discovery of Sarah's text messages to Adam, urging him to talk to Maggie before it's too late, changed everything. The prosecution now had the missing piece of the puzzle. Sarah had been involved in orchestrating the events that led to Maggie's death. What had once seemed like a quiet betrayal between two lovers was now a much more complex story of manipulation, obsession, and deadly consequences. Do you think Sarah's confession was the truth? Or do you think she was covering for someone else? Could someone else have pulled the strings from the shadows? The defense team struggled to maintain their grip, but the key question now was whether Sarah had acted alone or was influenced by someone else. The jury watched closely as the prosecution detailed how Sarah's actions had set the stage for the fatal confrontation between Maggie and Adam. But was she really the mastermind? Or was there another layer to this story, someone pulling the strings from the shadows? If you were in Sarah's shoes, would you have come clean earlier? Would you have tried to stop the inevitable, or let it unfold? The courtroom was thick with anticipation as the jury began their deliberations. A few days later, they returned with their verdict. The silence in the room was deafening as the judge began to speak. We, the jury, find the defendant, Sarah Martin, guilty of first-degree murder. A collective gasp swept through the room. Sarah, sitting quietly in the defendant's chair, looked stunned, her face drained of color. The weight of the verdict seemed to hit her all at once. Her life was changed forever, and the town of Newport would never see her the same way again. Was justice served today? Do you think the right person was convicted? Or is there still something missing from this case? The courtroom remained tense, the room filled with murmurs as the judge called for order. The emotional toll of the trial had taken its toll on everyone, from the Thompson family, who had lost their beloved Maggie, to Sarah's own family, who were left to reconcile the woman they had known with the actions she had taken. The people of Newport were left to pick up the pieces. Maggie's family mourned a woman they had loved, but Sarah's family was now left to grapple with the painful truth. What had caused this? Was it love, obsession, or something deeper still? Chris Thompson, the man who had been at the center of this storm, now found himself at a crossroads. He had lived through the torment of his wife's betrayal, but never could he have predicted the tragic end to their story. While Sarah was convicted, there was still a lingering question about Chris's role in the tragedy. Could he have played a part in this, too? What would you have done if you were Chris? Could you have forgiven Maggie for her affair, or would you have been just as devastated? The town, once a place of serenity, was forever changed. The whispers of the affair, the accusations, and the trial left their mark on Newport. The community that once believed in simple, idyllic life now knew that even here, in this quiet seaside town, betrayal and obsession could lead to murder. What do you think about the shocking twists in this case? Was Sarah really the mastermind, or is there still more to uncover? If you want more true crime stories like this, hit that subscribe button and make sure to let us know in the comments which case you'd like us to cover next. We have plenty more mysterious, jaw-dropping stories coming your way, and you won't want to miss them.